Well, hello friends. Debbie Swindoll here with Curt, and we're back for our last video celebrating the end of 10 years for Grafted Life Ministries. It's been fun to record these little kind of glimpses back and peeks forward with you. We've looked at spiritual direction and ESDA, our Spiritual Directors Association. We have looked at our curriculum and how we view just this experiential discipleship experience. And last week we looked at what we dream for families, and kind of if our other materials are kind of focused more on what happens in the church, that shifts a little bit to what happens at home. So thus the name At Home with God and what our dreams are for doing that. If you didn't get a chance to look at that video, I encourage you to go back and take a look at that, because there's some really exciting stuff there. So it's been fun to have this little retrospective with you all.
Yeah, it's been fun to go back through that and to look kind of past, present, and future as it relates to these areas. But I'm excited, Debbie, to tell folks about what we have planned in another area, and really a new area for Grafted Life, and that is providing counsel to churches. You know, folks don't know much about my background. They may know more about yours, just having they may know more about you just because you've been more associated with Grafted Life for longer. But I've spent the last 20 years consulting with a wide range of nonprofit organizations, the vast majority of those ministries, and some churches along the way as well. And so when I became more involved with Grafted Life, I was really interested in saying, how can I take so much of what I've learned and understood over those last 20 years, and even before that as a practitioner, and bring that into the church environment that Grafted Life is so committed to supporting. And so as you and I have gone back and forth on that, it felt like the first step in this process was to start creating a series of webinars, 1-hour content-rich webinars that would lead into a longer term, typically, perhaps an 8-week kind of experience that would be a real workshop for pastors. And one of the things I love about the workshop idea is that it invites pastors to engage with each other, not just with me as a perhaps as a consultant or a point of counsel, and certainly not alone, not on their own. And so, at its core, that's kind of what we have in mind, starting with a workshop or starting with a webinar and then leading into a workshop experience.
You know, it's interesting because we've talked about the family curriculum and children's curriculum for a while now. So although we've been dreaming about it and thinking about it and planning it for about 3 years, we've occasionally written about it and talked about it with people that are associated with Grafted Life. I guess the irony is that we've been in this conversation for about the same amount of time. We've been talking about this for about 3 years, praying about it, talking about how we could do more for pastors and leadership in churches. But I think what's amazing about it happening now is that this is a really unique time in the church. I mean, who anticipated that all churches everywhere would be getting this holy pause in their activities? I mean, no one would have been able to imagine that. And so here for several months now, churches have automatically stopped, had to scramble to do new things, rethink what they were doing. And so we think this is a very interesting time now to offer this kind of thing to pastors, because things are already stirred up.
Yeah.
And what has God been doing in all that?
Well, we know God's in the midst of the stirring. He's in the midst of using those uncomfortable places in our life to invite us to a different place. I think also, Debbie, we bring an interesting dynamic in terms of the two of us, at least that's what folks have said in some of the workshops that we've done in the past. How would you describe that?
Wow. I mean, we're like the integration. And this is one of the reasons why we've been talking about this for 3 years is we bring that beautiful integration of principles and strategies connected with how do we do that with God. So we honor the nature of what the church is, this place where God dwells, this place where God leads, but also that it's an organization that needs vision and plans and to determine where God's leading and how they're going to implement that plan.
You know, so much of my career I've spent listening to a tug of war, really, in a lot of organizations between, we need to be about business and business strategies and business mindsets and principles and practices and all of that. And on the other side, we're a ministry, we're not a business, and we should take a spiritual approach to what we do. And this tension that has existed in many organizations that has often felt unresolved, except for the majority of the board. If the majority of the board came from ministry backgrounds, then you tended to see practices more associated with spiritual sensitivity. And if they came from business backgrounds, then it was the opposite. And I think what we've tried to do is to not say it's one or the other, but to say, how do you get this beautiful blending and integration of both? As I think, Deb, about what we can bring pastors, I think that's one thing, is that we bring this dual voice approach. Second, we've already mentioned that we don't want pastors to do this work on their own. We want to invite them to do it with each other, certainly with us, and absolutely with God along the way. That's a key part of it. And a third thing that has been important to us has been to make this affordable for any church. Yeah. And so our pricing structure is not going to look like the traditional consulting pricing structure that I lived in for a lot of years. We're trying to make this affordable, and we're also trying to make it applicable. This isn't about just talking about things that large churches do and hoping small churches can find a way to do them. We really want to grapple in the small church space. It's not only for small churches, but we attend a very small church. We have several times in our married lives. And I think that it's important for this to be applicable to the vast majority of churches that are out there. So those are some of the things that come to my mind when I think about the benefit we can bring to pastors through the counsel we provide.
Yeah, and I would add to that the wonderful thing is, as we talk with pastors about being with God in their leadership and what's happening in their own spiritual life, as they're making these visionary and strategic decisions for their churches, we have follow-up material that helps their congregants do that too. So if God births something new in them, we have materials that they can use to help spur that conversation with the people in their church. So that's kind of a nice thing that we bring with the other materials we've already created as well.
Well, it just speaks to, I think, the holistic, integrated nature of what we're trying to accomplish at Grafted Life in being of service ultimately to the church, and really inviting people everywhere to do more of their life with God. Let me take a minute and just explain real quickly what we're anticipating by way of the first webinar we're rolling out literally within the next 2 weeks. We're calling it a model for rebooting your church. And we're offering kind of this idea of discover, discern, and then do. And so this idea is we'll walk pastors through a process for discovering where are we in our current situation, and then a prayerful process, a prayer guide we'll walk them through about how they might discern what God's inviting them to do given their current situation, and then ultimately encourage them to make decisions and to implement those things. Now, pastors will be able to walk away with that information intact. But for those that are interested in diving in more deeply, we're going to host an 8-week workshop on the same topic, but we're going to explore in depth 6 dimensions of church health that I've been thinking about for the last year. And it comes from a lot of my consulting background and all of that. We won't get into that right now. We're going to have some registration pages up on that. In fact, we'll have a registration page up momentarily on the webinar that we want to host. And we're anticipating hosting this a number of times over the next several months. So we hope folks will share this video and that information with their pastor, with pastoral groups they're aware of and the like, and just help us get the word out about that.
You know, I think about that workshop you were just talking about, and one of the hallmarks of Grafted Life over the last decade has been this idea that no one should journey alone.
Yeah.
And there's been such value in creating structures for people to be together, to discern together, to be in community. And I think about that as we move forward and what community means to us and how much we value it and how much we are longing for more community in these next phases of our ministry. And I think that's kind of the last invitation as we think about the next 10 years. Who is God calling to come alongside of us in community, where we can share the joy of doing this work together, of ministering to families, of continuing to get our products out there, of ministering in new ways to pastors? And what might that look like? Certainly prayer, there's great power in prayer. We received a note today from somebody who really encouraged us with saying, we're standing with you and here's our gift. And I just think about the spiritual power of that and what's God going to do with that? But we are longing for a larger community with that. I think, is there 20, 25 people who would say, we'll stand with you monthly. We'll give a monthly gift and we'll be a part of that community that moves the church forward in these ways, that supports families, that nurtures kids as we move into these new areas. So I just encourage people to pray about that and to ask God, what could I give? How can I be a part of this so that the community grows and I add my voice, I add my resources to what's being done through Grafted Life in these areas?
That would be great.
Yeah. And it would be a lovely experience. I think God smiles on that when we come together. So we just invite you. We thank you, everybody that's been a part of this last 10 years. We couldn't have done it without you. And so we're so grateful, and we're really looking forward to these new adventures and what God is opening up. And so thanks for listening in. Thanks for joining us the last 4 weeks. And we'll be in touch as things unfold, and we look forward to ministering together in the future.
Great.